The modern bicycle look like a machine from the future. Frames are molded from carbon fibre. Gears can change electronically at the touch of a button. Hydraulic disc brakes provide powerful control, while electric motors can assist the rider on climbs and over long distances. Some bicycles are now connected to smartphones, fitted with suspension and designed in wind tunnels to reduce even the smallest amount of aerodynamic drag. And yet, when we look beyond all this modern technology, the bicycle itself has changed remarkably little. Its basic arrangement, two similarly sized wheels, a steerable front wheel and a rear wheel driven by pedals and chain, has remained largely unchanged since John Kemp Starley introduced the commercially successful rover safety bicycle in 1885. But the bicycle did not suddenly appear in its modern form. The journey towards the machine we ride today began much earlier. It was shaped by decades of experimentation, unusual inventions, engineering breakthroughs, and designs that sometimes created as many problems as they solved. So let's go back to where it all began and see how the bicycle slowly evolved into the machine we know today. Long before the first bicycle appeared, people had imagined vehicles that seemed to anticipate some of its features. The most famous example is connected with Leonardo da Vinci. Among the pages of Codex Atlanticus is a small drawing of a machine with two wheels, a frame, pedals, and what appears to be a chain drive. At first glance, it looks remarkably similar to a bicycle, created more than 3 centuries before bicycles began appearing on European roads. However, the drawing cannot be treated as proof that Leonardo invented the bicycle. No working machine, detailed design, or contemporary account has been found to show that Leonardo, or anyone working in his studio, built or tested such a vehicle. For that reason, the documented history of the bicycle begins much later, with the earliest rideable two-wheeled vehicle reliably supported by historical sources. The first significant development took place in Germany in 1817. Baron Karl Drais was born in Karlsruhe in 1785. Drais came from an influential family and was originally trained for a career in the forestry administration of the German state of Baden. He also studied mathematics, physics and architecture at Heidelberg University. However, Drais was deeply interested in mechanics and invention. He eventually stepped away from active forestry service and devoted more of his time to developing new machines. His experiments included a device for recording piano music, an early form of shorthand machine, and several human-powered vehicles. Before creating his two-wheeler, he had already experimented with four-wheeled vehicles driven by human power. But his most important breakthrough came when he developed a vehicle with only two wheels, arranged in a single line. Drais called it the Laufmaschine, which translates as running machine. The Laufmaschine was constructed mainly from wood. Its two wheels were positioned one behind the other, while a pivoting front wheel allowed the rider to steer the machine. The rider sat on a saddle and pushed against the road with alternating feet. Once the machine gained speed, the rider could lift their feet and coast. In many ways, it worked like a modern children's balance bike. On 12 June 1817, Karl Drais rode his Laufmaschine from his home in Mannheim to a postal relay station. The outward journey covered approximately 7 kilometers and took around 30 minutes. Drais had demonstrated that a rider could balance on two wheels arranged in a single line and control the machine by steering the front wheel. This principle remains fundamental to bicycles and motorcycles today. The Laufmaschine soon became known as Draisine after its inventor, and the idea quickly spread beyond Germany. In France, Nicéphore Niepce constructed his own Draisine in 1818. In Britain, London coachmaker Dennis Johnson patented an improved version of Drais machine that same year. Marketed as the pedestrian curricle, it also became known as the hobby horse or dandy horse. Johnson promoted the machine through riding schools in London, where people could learn how to balance and propel it. Although this new form of personal transport attracted considerable attention, the enthusiasm did not last long. Because of their high price, these machines were mostly bought by aristocrats, prosperous professionals, and wealthy urban gentlemen. For most working people, they remained far beyond reach. The roads were often deeply rooted, making the Laufmaschine difficult to balance. Riders therefore moved onto smoother pavements, where their speed created conflicts with pedestrians, and eventually led authorities in several cities to restrict their use. By the early 1820s, the first two-wheeler craze had largely faded. The next major step came in France during the 1860s. Pedals and cranks were attached directly to the axle of the front wheel, allowing the rider to propel the machine continuously without pushing against the ground. This important development appeared in Paris during the early 1860s, but exactly who first came up with the idea remains uncertain. The work took place in the workshop of Pierre Michaud, a Parisian carriage maker who became closely associated with the production of the new pedal-powered velocipedes. Pierre Lallemand, a mechanic employed in Michaud's workshop, was also involved in their development. Both men were later credited with inventing the front-wheeled pedal system, but surviving evidence does not allow historians to determine with certainty which of them proposed or built it. Lallemand later left France and moved to New Haven, Connecticut. On 20 November 1886, he received United States patent number 59915 for an improvement in velocipedes. His patent clearly showed a two-wheeled machine with cranks and pedals fitted directly to the axle of the front wheel. The patent provides firm evidence of Lallemand's design, but it does not completely settle the earlier question of whether the original idea came from him, from Michaud, or developed through their work together in Michaud's workshop. Velocipedes used wooden wheels, metal tires, and relatively heavy frames. With little protection from rough surfaces, the ride was uncomfortable, and the machines were later given the nickname boneshakers. Despite their weight, discomfort, and difficult handling, velocipedes became a major urban craze during the late 1860s. At first, they were used mainly for recreation rather than everyday transport. Riders visited indoor schools and halls where they could learn to balance, practice, and compete with others. In the United States, the fashion became particularly popular among university students, including those at Harvard and Yale. Owning a velocipede was not cheap. Surviving American examples from 1868 and 1869 were originally priced at between $120 to $160, placing private ownership beyond the means of many working people. Buyers were therefore more likely to come from households with disposable income. For a brief period, velocipede riding became a fashionable urban sport and social activity. Manufacturers rushed to meet the demand, while demonstrations, lessons, and races helped attract public attention. However, the machines were expensive, physically demanding, and poorly suited to rough roads. As a result, the enthusiasm faded almost as rapidly as it had appeared. Also, on the early pedal velocipede, the cranks were fixed directly to the front wheel axle. One complete turn of the pedal therefore produced exactly one complete turn of the wheel. Because there was no chain, separate drivetrain, or adjustable gearing, the speed of the machine was limited by two things: how quickly the rider could pedal and how far the wheel traveled during each revolution. To travel further with every turn of the pedals, designers began making the front wheel larger. The principle was simple. A larger wheel has a greater circumference, so each revolution carries the rider further along the road. Increasing the size of the driven wheel therefore allowed the bicycle to travel faster without forcing the rider to pedal at an impossibly high rate. However, the heavy wooden wheels used on early velocipedes could not simply be enlarged without becoming impractical. The development of lighter metal rims and tensioned wire spokes made it possible to build much larger wheels without a huge increase in weight. One of the important figures in this development was James Starley, a British engineer and cycle manufacturer based in Coventry. In 1871, Starley and William Hillman introduced the Ariel, an influential high-wheel bicycle with wire spokes. Over the following years, high-wheel bicycles became lighter and more refined. Their wheels, frames, bearings, and solid rubber tyres improved, and the machines became capable of much greater speed than the earlier boneshakers. At the time, this type of bicycle was usually called the ordinary because it became the standard two-wheel bicycles of its period. It was later wildly nicknamed the penny-farthing, as the large front wheel beside the much smaller rear wheel resembled the difference in size between the British penny and farthing coins. For those who could master it, the ordinary offered something remarkable: fast independent travel without relying on a horse, railway timetable or a ticket. Riders used them for recreation, racing and longer journeys into the countryside. Cycling clubs were formed, particularly among men, and organised group riders became part of a growing culture of leisure and sport. Some clubs developed their own uniforms, rules and traditions. However, the ordinary was not a bicycle that everyone could easily use. The size of the front wheel was limited by the rider's leg length, because the rider needed to reach the pedals at the center of the wheel. Taller riders could use larger wheels and gain a mechanical advantage over shorter riders. Mounting the machine required the rider to place one foot on a small step above the rear wheel, push the bicycle forward and climb onto the saddle while it was already moving. Stopping and dismounting also required practice, balance and confidence. The bicycle became particularly associated with athletic young men. Women did occasionally ride high-wheel bicycles, but contemporary clothing and social expectations made them impractical for most women. Adult tricycles became a more accepted alternative, allowing riders to sit lower and eliminating the need to balance on two wheels. The high-wheel bicycle also carried a serious risk. The saddle was positioned high above the ground and close to the top of the large front wheel. On some machines, the rider sat more than 1.5 meters above the road. If the front wheel struck a stone, rut, or sudden change in the road surface, the wheel could slow or stop, while the rider's body continued moving forward. Because the rider's weight was positioned so close to the front of the machine, they could be thrown headfirst over the handlebars. This kind of fall became known as a header. These limitations encouraged investors to search for a bicycle that could retain the ordinary speed while placing the rider closer to the ground. During the late 19th century, designers produced many alternatives intended to reduce the dangers of the ordinary. Some retained the basic high-wheel design, but moved the rider's weight further back. One example was the American Star, introduced in the United States during the early 1880s. Unlike the ordinary, it placed the large driving wheel at the rear and a small steering wheel at the front. The rear wheel was driven by the treadless rather than conventional rotary pedals. This arrangement greatly reduced the danger of the rider being thrown forward over the front wheel, although the Star never became as popular as the ordinary. Other designers reduced the size of the wheels and used an indirect drive to maintain useful speed. Henry Lawson's bicyclette, first developed during the 1870s and produced in an improved form in 1879, used a chain to connect a centrally positioned crank to the rear wheel. This allowed the rider to sit much closer to the ground. The machine was never commercially successful, but its rear wheel chain drive was an important step towards the modern safety bicycle. Another solution was to add a third wheel. James Starley's Coventry Rotary became the first commercially successful tricycle. Its three-wheel arrangement meant that riders did not need to balance in the same way as they did on an ordinary, and the risk of being thrown forwards in a header was greatly reduced. However, early tricycles introduced problems of their own. Their steering could be unpredictable, and riders had to slow down and shift their weight carefully when cornering to avoid tipping over. Even so, tricycles opened cycling to a much wider group of people. They were particularly important for women, whose long skirts and the social conventions of the period made high-wheel bicycles difficult and often unacceptable to ride. In 1885, John Kemp Starley introduced Rover's safety bicycle. The Rover was not the first experiment with chain drive or smaller wheels, but it became the first commercially successful safety bicycle and one of the most important machines in bicycle history. It had a rear wheel driven by a chain. wheels of similar size, and a frame approaching the familiar diamond frame arrangement. The rider sat much lower and further behind the front wheel contact point than on an ordinary. Because the chain provided the required gear ratio, the bicycle could use reasonably sized wheels without sacrificing useful speed. The safety bicycle greatly expanded the number of people who could cycle. Cycling became increasingly popular among both men and women, and the bicycle developed into a practical vehicle for transport as well as leisure and sport. But the early rover still used solid rubber tyres. These were of course more comfortable than bare iron tyres, but they transmitted much of the vibration from the road directly to the bicycle and rider. And although Robert William Thomson had received a British patent for a pneumatic tyre in 1845, decades before the safety bicycle became established, his idea did not become a widely adopted bicycle product at that time. In 1888 in Belfast, John Boyd Dunlop independently developed an air-filled tyre. Dunlop's version was successfully applied to cycles and gained public attention through racing and commercial promotion. Although the safety bicycle had established the basic form of the modern bicycle, most early machines still had only one gear. The size of the front chainring and the rear sprocket determined how far the bicycle travelled with each turn of the pedals. A high ratio allowed greater speed on level roads, but required more force when climbing. A lower ratio made hills easier, but limited the bicycle's speed. Changing the ratio usually meant physically replacing one of the sprockets. What riders needed was a mechanism that could provide several ratios on the same bicycle. The most successful early example appeared in 1902 in Nottingham. Working with patents associated with Henry Sturmey and James Archer, engineers connected with Frank Bowden and the Raleigh Company developed the first Sturmey-Archer 3-speed hub. Its gears were enclosed inside an enlarged rear wheel hub. From the outside, the bicycle could still use a single chainring, one chain and one rear sprocket. The change-of ratio took place inside the hub shell. The 3-speed system offered 3 different operating conditions. In the middle gear, the drive passed through the hub at a direct ratio. The rear sprocket and the hub shell effectively turned together, so one rotation of the sprocket produced one rotation of the wheel. In low gear, the internal planetary mechanism made the hub shell and the wheel turn more slowly than the sprocket. The bicycle travelled at shorter distance with each turn of the pedals, but the rider gained greater mechanical advantage. This made it easier to start, climb hills, or ride against a headwind. In the high gear, the arrangement was reversed. The internal mechanism made the hub shell turn faster than the sprocket, allowing bicycle to travel further with each pedal revolution. However, the rider had to apply more force. At around the same time, another type of gear system was developing in France and Britain, the shifting chain gear, now known as the derailleur. The basic derailleur principle was simpler than internal hub. Instead of changing the speed through a planetary gearbox, it changed the effective ratio by moving the chain between sprockets of different diameter. By the middle of the 20th century, derailleur systems could provide considerably more ratios than a traditional 3-speed hub. Once gears were added, the bicycle had evolved into the machine we recognize today. As you can see, no single person invented the modern bicycle in its complete form. It emerged gradually as inventors, engineers and manufacturers improved one part at a time, sometimes succeeding and sometimes failing, and often building on ideas developed by others. Perhaps the most remarkable part of this story is not how much the bicycle has changed, but how early its essential design became established. More than a century after the safety bicycle appeared, we are still riding machines based on the same fundamental principles. The bicycle remains what it has always been, a simple machine that turns human effort into movement, and gives its rider the freedom to travel under their own power.